You worked for a long time as a police officer, retired police officer. What would you say to somebody who did not understand why lots of people, and in particular, and correct me if I'm wrong, a good percentage of police officers have a deep-rooted distrust of the mainstream media?
So I think it kind of goes back to the 24-hour news cycle where they had to create the news rather than report the news. And it just kind of grew out of that. So one of my first experiences with a reporter was on an accident scene. It was a rollover accident. And I was really new. I was actually on my FTO. And this reporter came up and he had his camera and he's trying to film the accident scene. And my FTO told me, "Hey, get him out of here. Like, don't let that guy in here, you know?" And because it was pretty bad. So I said, "Yeah, okay, cool." So I, moved the guy back, tell him like, "Hey, you can't film this young girl they're trying to extract from this car. Like she might not make it, her family." And I'm talking like a regular person because I'm brand new. I don't know, And I'm like, "Listen, man, let's just be considerate of the family. We don't know what's going to happen with this girl and all that." And he looks me dead in the face and goes, "Get out of the way of my shot." And I said, "I'm not getting out. No, you can't film here. You have to move, you know?" So I move him back. He's not happy about it. I move him back beyond the designated area. And we're still on scenes like that. It's rapidly evolving, fire equipment's coming in, all this stuff. And so we're still trying to set up a perimeter where the firefighters can work safely, stop all that stuff, manage traffic, everything. We don't want people driving through, the accident scene and all that. And so I move him back, and he says, "Are you going to tell me what happened here?" He goes, "Fine, fine, fine." Move him back. He goes, "You going to tell me what happened out there?" And I go, "No, no, I can't." And by now, there's more reporters starting to show up. And I said, "No, I can't. I can't tell you what happened out there." And mind you, like I'm a peon at this point. Like most of these guys don't even know my name. I'm just new guy. So they're like, "Hey, new guy, keep the press over there, keep them away." And so I'm talking to this guy, and he looks me square on, and he says, "Listen, you can tell me what happened, or I'm going to film this with you in the shot saying an unnamed source at the police department told us blah, blah, blah." And so kind of it was like the strong arm tactic to get me to either tell him what's going on or he's just going to make it up and then they can do a retraction later. And that was my introduction to that side of it. Now, and I'm sure that's not all of them, right? Because, well, at least I hope not. That can't be the majority of them. But from that point on, I really began to just distrust them. It just was like, how can you get the story so wrong? And why? And then I started to see that a lot of times it was just to be divisive. It was just to be divisive, and even like in my situation, when my whole thing went down, I don't know if you ever read the articles that were going around the internet. I hate to mention it because then people Google it, and then my good Google ratings go down, but, but even in that, they never talked to me. They never
Right.
contacted my attorney. They just ran with the story. And then they get to the end of the story. So they go through this whole thing and they get to the end of the story. And it's like 4 lines that say, "No charges were brought. The Kane County State's Attorney's Office refused to authorize charges because there was no basis for charges. And we're done. He got in trouble for administrative errors. We're done. There was no criminal act." And but that's not the headline. And that's not like the first however many paragraphs. That's the very last paragraph. And without ever even talking to me, without ever having a like never sitting down with me and saying, "Hey, what happened?" Or my attorney, So when you see stuff like that, where they just take one side and run with it. And next thing I know, it's all over the country. So it's one of those things where you look at it and you go, that's all it takes for these guys to ruin somebody's life if they get a chance or try to. you know,
Right.
without conscience, and also without even trying to get both sides of the story. Like they didn't do their due diligence, you
Right.
know, and so things like that just cause folks like me and a lot of other people to look at the media and go, "You guys are hacks.
Mhm.
You're not actually trying to find out what the story is. You just want a headline that will sell, get clicks or views or whatever, and keep narrating to your fan base what you want them to take in and digest, and then
Right.
that's it. It's not a search for the truth. I think
Right.
that's the issue.
Right.
It's just not a search for the truth, and that's bad for everybody, because then that opens the door for these other guys to say, "Hey, we've got the truth." As crazy as it might sound, and then you've got people that are freaking out about 5G and all this other stuff, and they completely forget Occam's razor. Like that's probably not the explanation for that, like
It's actually lizard people that are aliens.
Nephilim, Nephilim.
Definitely. You have so much more real world experience than I do with that. But I did for a couple years spend a lot of time looking at a lot of that data and a lot of the shootings for stuff that I was writing. And then that's when it dawned on me that the actual mainstream media narrative is not just wrong. It's almost backwards. And my experience was looking at the reporting, it was wrong pretty much every single time.
Yeah.
And so for people that don't know, you work in a rough neighborhood where there was a high crime neighborhood, right?
Mhm.
And for a long time, you were a community police officer. So you lived there with your family in that same neighborhood.
Yeah. I lived there.
Saw lots of shootings.
Right.
And how often did they get the story right?
Pretty much never. Pretty much never. They just there's really no interest in getting it right, and that's disappointing, because you have this platform where you could do something good. You have this platform where you could bring about change. You have literally people listening to you simply because the position that they hold, and they do what with it? There's so many analogies we could use, right? Like it's like having this ability to just compose incredibly complex and intricate and moving pieces of music, and instead you're like, "Hey man, I'm just going to play your favorite. I'm just going to play some rap." you know you know but not really, but you know what I'm saying. It's just, I could do all that, or I could just play like some chopsticks, just two notes over and over repetitively. And but why? That's what I always come back to. Why?
That's
Why
what
would you do that?
why do you think that happens? I mean, obviously there's the clickbait, but even if it was just all about clickbait and ratings, you can get ratings different ways. You could get ratings lying about the story from the other perspective.
Right.
But they almost always have a very similar narrative that they're all following. Is it because they're lazy? Is it because they're ideological? What do you think?
I think there's both of those reasons, I think. And then also I think that there's when you have a buddy of mine put it, we were talking about spiritual leaders. When you have a broken person in a position of leadership in a spiritual or an environment that's heavily weighted towards enlightenment, like the spiritual and that kind of thing, it's so easy to go over into toxicity. So easy for that brokenness to then break other people. And so I think sometimes you have some of that going on, where you have maybe some dysfunctional people, some folks that are just kind of broken. They haven't dealt with their issues. And then now they're in a position where people are listening to them, and that brokenness comes through, that kind of that toxic, like the world's a terrible place, comes out of them, through this channel that they have to just dump this on people. There's also the human almost predilection towards negativity.
Yeah.
Where people want to see the traffic accident. Like they want to see how bad it is. And it's like, why would you want to see that? You're never going to be able to unsee it, man.
Right.
You know? And then the other thing that I think too is if we think about any relationship, like a family dynamic, and I had a friend that's a counselor, and she explained this to me years ago, and suddenly a lot of things clicked for me. But when you have a person, you constantly have a strife in your family or any relationship, a gym, whatever it might be, business. You constantly have this strife, right? And you just can't figure it out. Like, why are we always fighting? Why is every family gathering turns into a fight? There's always drama. There's always a screaming match. Like, why is there always drama in the business or whatever the organization might be? And she said, you have to find the person. There's one person who is usually the source of all the contention. That person is also the person who's letting everybody else know what's going on. Like, hey, I just want you to know so-and-so said this. I just want you to know. And so that person, and what that does for that person is makes them the center of attention, because they're the person you go to find out what was said,
right,
what was done. And so every time there's a gathering of everybody, they know they're going to be the center of attention in some way, because everybody wants to know what was said and they're the person to go to. And they could use that for good, but usually it's a broken person. Mm-hmm. Usually it's a person that's toxic, you know, and they trend towards the negative. And in a lot of ways, I think the media is that kid, right? Like media is that person in our relationship as a whole, as a society, where they just keep this negativity spinning because it keeps us glued to the screen to see what's next, to see what's going on. Like, oh, there's all of this racial tension. There's this or there's that. You know, before COVID, you know, I could go to my coffee shop and have a conversation with 4 or 5 different people from different backgrounds, and I never saw hatred or tension. Yeah, the world's not a perfect place, but when we get away from the screen, we get away from their feed, we kind of, like my friend the counselor told me, like, you have to find a way to exclude them from the conversation. You have to find a way to go to the people that feel like you have wronged them, according to this person, and talk to them face to face and say, listen, like, let's leave him or her completely out of this. What are our issues? Like, do we even have an issue if we leave everything that they've said out? Mm-hmm. Right? And it's just suddenly, all of a sudden, you know, it's like the clouds part, you know, and we have a double rainbow and all that good stuff. But it's just like that kind of stuff. I think, like, when we find a way to kind of parse that toxic child or that toxic person out of the conversation, which would be the media, who needs our attention. Without us, they don't exist. There's no 24-hour news cycle if we're not watching. And so they need us. So how do they get us? Negativity. It's so much easier. Like, if it bleeds, it leads, right? If I have something negative to say, if I can give you information about whomever it is, this is what they think about you and your group, got you split. You know, like, I've got you divided now, and I'm the source of information. You got to come to me. So I think that's where something went wrong. My opinion, you know, just that's where something went wrong. I don't know how to fix it other than like that. Like, we as a society have to decide, I'm not going to allow Fox, CNN, MSNBC, whatever it might be, I'm not going to allow them to decide or determine how I look at my neighbors, how I look at the guy standing next to me in line, or whatever it is. It's just, I'm not going to do it anymore. And then once we unplug from them, I think it would decrease. First off, it would decrease their control and their hold over us. Also, it would shut down their ability to dictate the conversation. They need that division, man. They need us angry. You know, like, they need us fighting with each other. Without that, we don't need them.
Right.
You know?